Dalid Amid Aleph. Bishul Merava Kiech Levin Alolo Shachas Valat Zava. According to Rava, we're talking about the Amma of 6 Tvachim, but we said that what it really means is sometimes it was more, sometimes it was less. It wasn't exactly the exact length. El Abaya Kasha. Abaya didn't learn that way. Amlacha Abaya Ema Amos Klayim Ba'ama Bashisha. That the unbelievable. All night long, don't hear a word. Now I start teaching. Mario, just put it on pause for a minute.
Did the filters arrive? Did the filters arrive? Okay, I have to hang up. I'm in the middle of this year. All right? Bye. You're on, Ernie.
Okay. That the Amma that was used to measure a vineyard was an Amma of 6 Tvachim. Afraid to Gemara of Amid, Tony Saver Rabbi Shimon Oimer. Call Amma Sha'amr Chachamim B'Klayim B'Amma Bashisha. Uvilvad Shlo Yemutzum Tzamois. That every Amma involved in the measuring of Kloim is a 6 Tvachim Amma. But you could be a little more or a little bit less. Michlal the Tanakama Kol Amas Ka'amar means the Tanakama is arguing with Rav Shimon Gamliel and says that it's an exact 6 Tvachim. Yeah, but Rav Shimon Gamliel holds like me. I'm not Dami Rav Shimon Gamliel. Fine. According to Abaya, it's certainly Machlokes Tanoim. But Rava Milema Tanoim. Do we have to say it's a Machlokes Tanoim according to Rava? Rava, Rav Shimon Gamliel ha'asa lashmi'inon. Rav Shimon Gamliel is telling us the chiddush that Amas Klein lo yitzamtzem. That an Am of Klein, because it's a Doraisa Deke Isser, they should not say more or less. It should be exact. So the Gemara says, then why didn't he say very clearly, V'lema Amas Klein lo yitzamtzem? The Amma of 6 Tvachim by Klein should not be approximated. Or it should have said, V'ama Bashisha l'mutem. Now, V'ama Bashisha l'mutem. And therefore, what is he coming to exclude by saying Amma Bashisha? Lav l'mutem Amma Sukkah V'ama Mavui. And perhaps it's also coming to exclude that it's only by Kloim that it's 6 Tvachim, but by the Sukkah Amma and a Mavui Amma is not. Of course, there's not a raya that we're rejecting Sukkah and Mavui. Rather, the Me'ute Amma Yisod V'Amma Sovit, that when they built the Mizbeach, remember the Mizbeach was 10 Amas tall, and it was sort of indented in, right? It went up by an Amma and then in, so then you had a foundation. Then it went up another 5, so now you're up at 6 Amas from the ground, there was an indent. And that indent was the Sovit that the coin walked around. Then it went up another 3 to the top, and then you had the Karen, which was an Amma, the corner. So it's to tell me that the Amma, the Amma Soved was an Amma of 5 Tvachim. Dichsiv, Eile midas amizbech ba'amas Amma, Amma v'toifach, b'cheika Amma v'Amma roicha b'gulat al svaz saviv, zeres ha'echad v'zeh gav amizbech. This is the pasuk in Yechezkel, and the Gemara darshans. Cheika Amma refers to Zeyisov. The Amma Rochav, the width is the Sovet, which when you went up 6 Amas, you had a sort of a walkway around his back. That's the corners had a horn that were 1 Amma high. So it was 9 Amas to the top, but each corner had an Amma that made it a 10 Amma Mizbeach. The Gava Mizbeach is referring not to the outside Mizbeach, but to the inner Mizbeach, the golden one, that is also measured when it gives us an amma measurement. It's referring to the smaller 5 tefach measurement, not the 6 tefach am. Omra B'chia Barashi Amara. Shi'urin means measurements of mitzvos, like when we say something is a kazayas or something is a kibetza, right? So shi'urim, chatzitzin, the concept that there are some things that if you go into a mikvah, it's going to serve as a separation between the skin and the mikvah, and the laws of mechitzin, how tall a wall has to be Rosh Hashanah, right? All of these laws, shiurin, chatzitz, mechitza, halach l'Moshe Sinai. These are halachas given to Moshe Sinai. They're not, you can't find sources of them in the Torah, written. So something, a mitzvah that was given to Moshe is called halach l'Moshe Sinai. Frag the Gemara, shiur in Doraisahu. I mean, shiur and have a pasuk. How could you say it's halach l'Moshe Sinai? Where do we see that? T'chsi. Eretz chita usara, gefen teina brimon, eretz zeit shemen udvash. We just laid this. This was last parsha Eikev. V'amar Rav Chanan, kol hapasuk hazeh l'shiurin nema. This whole pasuk is a pasuk that relates to shiurin, measurements. Where do we see measurements? So chito, when it says wheat, lichiditna, anichnas l'bayis hamenuga. So saras can afflict the body of a human being. It can afflict clothing, and it can inflict a house. So let's say you see a neg in a house, and you walk into the house, the kelev al ktefav, and we're not talking about the clothes that he's wearing, but he happens to be carrying clothing on his shoulder, and the sandal of the tabois biyadav, and his shoes and sandals in his hands. So who behem tmei miyad? His body, and these items become tamei immediately. Because that's what happens if you walk into a house that's struck with netzaras. Haya labush kelev v'sandav b'raglav. Let's say he was wearing his clothing, and his shoes are on his feet. The taboisav etzboisav, and his rings are on his finger. Who tami miyat? His physical body is tummy right away. These items that he's wearing will only become tummy if he stays in the house a period of time that would take him to eat a loaf of bread. Because it says va'ochel b'bayis yichabesus kadav. So it's not talking about achila, but it's this period of time that it takes you to do achila. And what kind of bread? Paschitin v'lo pasorin. We're talking about wheat bread and not barley bread. Which it takes you quicker to eat wheat bread than barley bread. And it's a kind of bread mesa v'oichel belifta that you would lean back and you would dip in like in a sauce. So we see chita is a reference to a shear of eating loaf of bread, achilas pras. What's seora? This non etzem kiseora metabe b'mago v'masa ve'ena metabe ba'oel. So we know a corpse, a dead corpse, if it's in a room, it's metame everything in the room. That's tumas oihel. Now, if you have a whole skeleton, that's metame like a corpse, or a skull. We'll see. It's metame like a corpse. But if you have a bone the size of a barley, it's metame b'mago v'masa. If you touch it or you carry it in a box, you become tame. But the ain't metame b'oel. But it does not have tumas oil. Unless you have, as I said, a complete spinal column, shedra shlema, says Rashi, ogul golus, or skull, or the majority of bones, which is 2 thigh bones or let's say you have however number of bones in the body, Rashi says 125. That would be a majority. Because 124 times 2 is 248, so they have 248 Eivorim. So if you have 125 bones, even if it's not a skull or a spinal column, that would be Matame Be'ohel. But we see that the shear of Tumah by a bone is Kisa'ora. So that's the pasuk. Eretz Chito Sa'ora. Then we have to account for Geffen Te'ena Verimo. Geffen K'dei Revius Yain L'Nozi. That the amount of wine that a Nazir gets Malchus for, a Nazir is somebody who takes a vow. It's usually for 30 days. And he's prohibited to drink wine. He's prohibited to go to a funeral. He's prohibited to cut his hair. And Stam Nazir is 30 days. So we know that the shear of what's prohibited is a Revius Yain L'Nazir. Te'ena, a fig, it's Kagroigos Lotzar Shabbos. That means the amount of things you have to carry to trigger a chiyuv for carrying on Shabbos between Rosh Hashanah and Rosh Hashanah is this. If you carry food, the size of it is the size of a dried fig. Rimon. What's the shear that the word Rimon teaches us? Kol klei balibatim shiurin karimon. So kalim, if a sheretz touched a kli, or if a kli was in the room with a corpse, so the kli becomes tummy. Now, the tumah leaves the kli if the kli is broken. So for householders' kli, if that kli has a hole, the bottom of it, that a pomegranate could fall out of, well, that's not much of a kli left. And therefore, the chol hadeis, that's the shear that says that a kli is now torn. Then the pasuk said, Eretz Zeit Shemen Udvash, which means Eretz Shekol Shiurei Kazesi. A zayis, an olive, is usually the shear. For example, if you eat chaylev, if you eat dam, if you eat noiser, if you eat pigul, if you eat something that's tummy, if you eat nevela, if you eat non-kosher animal. Is the shear kazayis. So it refers to a land where all the shear are kazayis. Right? The Gemara calls shiureh. It's not all the shear, and we just discussed a number of shear that have nothing to do with kazayis. We talked about kagroigres, we talked about kirimon, we talked about kechita. Right? The majority of shiurim, like we said, chaylev, dam, noiser, pigul, all the various things that we know are prohibited. The shear which triggers malchus would be a kazayis. Dvash, when the pasuk says dvash, so that dvash does not refer to bee honey. It refers to date honey, because dates are one of the fruits in Eretz Yisrael. And what's the shear relating to a date? So to trigger the isser of achila and Yom Kippurim, it's not kazayis, it's a large date. So we see, how can you tell me these shiurim halach l'moshe misinai? These shiurim are learned from a pasuk in the Torah, so it's not halach l'moshe misinai. Freit the Gemara of it is b'shirei michtav ksivi. You don't see that this pasuk gave us these very shiurim. It didn't say, when it talked about yayin, it didn't say revius yayin. It just said gefen. It didn't say kegroigres when it talked about te'ena. I mean, it's all a draw. Elahilchasanim. It's halach l'moshe misinai. Bas mechinu rabbanon akroy. The Chacham sort of leaned on a pasuk as a mnemonic or something to also give support to the halach l'moshe misinai. Then the Mishnah said chatzitzin, the dinim, that if you go into a mikveh and you have some kind of item on your skin that's going to be choitzitz. It's going to be a division between your skin and the water, so the tefillah will not be good. Freik the Gemara, how can you tell me chatzitzin is halach l'mishin? So deraisa ninu. It's a befer shtik a pasuk tichsiv v'rachat es kol psaro b'mayim shelo yeh davar chatzitz ben psar l'mayim. And b'mayim means bei mikvah. And kol psaro means mayim shekol gufo ola behem. It's how much water? It's the amount of displacement of a standard 70 kilogram person. Kamahain ama al ama berum sholosh amos. We're talking about 3 square amos. If you have a pit, 2 feet by 2 feet, 2 feet length and 2 feet wide by 3 feet deep, that's 3 square amos. Remember, an am is 2 feet. So it's not quite a yard. It wouldn't be 3 cubic yards. It's 2 by 2 by 2.
12 square feet.
It's 8 cubic feet.
2 by 2 by 3.
Excuse me, 2 by 2 for 12 cubic feet. 2 by 2 by 3. Well, whatever no, it's got to be a volume equation. There's a volume equation, like 4 pi r something. It's not just, that would give us the area. 4 by 4 would give us 8 square feet. Excuse me, 2 by 2 would give you 4 square feet. But to come up with a cubic feet, you'd have to plug in the volume formula. 1 by 1 by 3. Whatever it is, the Chachamim calculated that that's our boy and saw. So you see, this pasuk gives us all the shiurim. So Gemara says, Erechanami, but there's still a halach l'mashmash mesina involved. Ki it's rachilchas l'sa'aro, to teach me the din that your hair, if it's entangled, could be a chatzitza and passel the mikvah, or passel, that you don't become tahor in the mikvah. Rav Huna, nima achas kshura choitzetzes. If you have one hair that's tied and stuck, then the water doesn't go into that, and it will serve as a chatzitza. Shalosh, if you have 3 hairs that are wound together, so there's a lot of room in between, and therefore that would not be a chatzitza. Ein on chatzitza. Shtayim, any of there. 2, he doesn't know. So the din that hair can serve as a chatzitza is a halach Moshe Mesina. Freit the Gemara Saro Nami Doraisu. Hair is also a Dorais. The Tanya Vrachat is called Psaro. S is Darshan's Hatofel Psaro V'zeu Seyar. That refers to hair. So it's not halach Moshe Mesina, it's a pasuk. Ki asoy hilchasa lerubo ulemiuto. Leruba, Lumiuto, Lumakbid, Lushein Makbid. These concepts, Rav Yitzchak, Dam Rav Yitzchak, Dvar Torah, Rubo, Umakbid Alav. Let's say the majority of his body is covered with something that is choitzes, like dirt. And he's makbid on it. And this is something that he normally would get rid of. So, choitzes. So that will serve as a chatzitza. Says Rashi, Aloch l'Moshe Mesina b'Torah Shebal Peh. V'sheinu makbid alav. Now let's say he's covered with something that he wouldn't care about, ain't a chotzes. However, gazru al rubo sheinu makbid. Chacham made a gzeira. If the majority of his body is covered, even by something that he's not makbid, because mishum rubo al makbid. So for that I understand that gzeira. But then they did va'al miuto amakbid. But then they also said even if his body was covered less than 50%, but if it's an item that he's normally makbid to wash off, that's also osir because of ruba makbid. The Gemara of Listen, if you're going to start making all these errors, why don't you do it if it's less than 50% on something that is not makbid? Or inami mishum rubo sheina makbid, or a majority that he's not makbid. More he goof exera, not make him an exera. The whole thing is exera. What, we're going to make exera and exera? So to that extent, we don't go. Then it says mechitzos. Mechitzos, we also said that the laws of how big a wall has to be by Sukkah or by Shabbos, right? We said is aloch l'moshe misinai. Freik the more deraisen in it. The Omar Mar, Aron Tisha. The dimension of the arm was Tisha. Tfach. In the kaporas tefach, the thickness of the kaporas was 1 tefach. Harei kanasara. And this is l'chura, the walls, at least of one of the kalim. So, lo tzrich Rav Yehuda Domer amas binyan ba'ama bashisha. You don't understand. When we look at the building, that amma is an amma of 6 tefachim. Amas kalim is ba'amas bas chamisha. The aron is not a building; it's a kli, and therefore. An aron is a kli. It was an amma of a chetzi, so therefore its height was 7 tefachim and a half. And in a chanami, we need the halach l'moshe mesina. Ul Rab Meir damar kol ha'amos hayu bebeinanis Mike Lemay. Rab Meir says that in the Beis Hamikdash, the amos that were used were middle amos. And amma bashisha beinanis l'choloda. A regular, the length, and amma basically was the distance of your arm to your finger. But you're talking about a sort of a medium-sized guy, not Og Melech Habasha. According to Reb Meir, it says Kol Amasai V'Benis Michael Meimar. So Reb Meir Kiyasa Yilchas Lagud L'Lavud L'Dof Nakum. That when we say there's Aloch L'Mashina Moshe Machine regarding Mechitzos, so we have the concept of good, right? If you have a wall of a sukkah that's going up, and let's say there's a space. So if it's less than 3 tefachim, you can draw the wall up to the schach, and it's not a problem. So that's good asik and good achis. We're saying if the wall comes down to the ground, but there's a space, if it's less than 3 tefachim, you can use good. Lavud is side by side, the same kind of concept. If you have a gap, you can use lavud. As long as it's less than 3 tefachim. They're considered as one unit. And l'dof nakuma. We said yesterday that you have the wall of a sukkah going up, and you have physical ceiling. So if it's 4 tefachim or more, then the sukkah is pasul. Because we view the wall as if it's a straight wall, as long as it's not that long when it bends, it's not that long. Then the Mishnah says, if the crossbeam at the mouth of the mavui was higher than 20 amas, and you want to come to lower it, how much you have to lower it? Freak the Gemara. What do you mean? You got to get it within 20 amas. So if it's 25 amas, you got to lower it 5 amas. If it's 30 amas, you got to lower it 10 amas. It's whatever you need to get it within the shear. What we're asking is, let's say you're raising the ground. Not that you're lowering the beam, but you're building up the ground of the mavui because you want the opening of the space of the mavui to be less than 20 amas, and you want to raise the ground. What's the width of the raise that you have to do? Just like the beam itself is enough to be the width of a tefach, when you raise that part of the ground underneath the beam to reduce the space to 20, it only has to be one tefach wide. Abaya Amar Arba. He says it has to be 4 tefach wide. Lema Bakamifli, the man Amar tefach suffer mutuli shtamish tachzakol. The one who learns that it's got to be a tefach holds. See, there's a question: Can you carry something? We know if you have a koira, if you have a beam correcting a mavli, you can carry the mavli. Well, the question is, can you carry directly underneath the beam? So, from the outer part of the beam, you draw an imaginary line down, and so within there, you could carry. And according to that, mandam or tefach holds mutter lishtamish tachzakoyre. Mandam our books are also lishtamish tachzakoyre. We'll have to understand why that is. Why a buyer holds that, or the mandam that holds that you need 4 tefach, it's going to be prohibited to carry under the koyre. And we'll see what the final halacha is. Okay, tomorrow's a small blot, a little complicated.
At what time?